Please welcome the happiness lady, Glendora. Hi, Glendora. How are you? Pleasure to see you. You're known as the happiness lady,
Well,
is that what they say?
No.
What do they call you?
Glendora.
Yeah.
And what did you say your name was?
I'm Dave. I'll be my last night.
You are a very good interviewer.
Well, thank you.
And I'm going to recommend you for a raise.
Thank you.
The recipe for happiness, David, is that there's one thing in this world that you can do better than anybody else. And if you will go by yourself, you will find out what that is. And you will do it, and you'll be happy. Now, if you don't do it, David, it's going to nag at you every second of your life.
So you find out what it is that you're good at.
No, the one thing that you can do better than anybody else.
The one thing you can do better than anyone else, and you just concentrate on that.
Yes, you do.
And then that'll make you happy.
Well, sure, because you'll get everything you want.
Yeah.
Favor from God, and reading Shakespeare, and reading Kelly Sheets, and Wordsworth. Kelly and Sheets. Sheets and Kelly. I'm getting interested in the academics and really changing over. So now we're up to the year 1945. The second half of the year. In May, Glendora turns 40. Turns what? 18. She goes into the senior year of high school at 18 years old. And it's in 1945. And the war is over in Europe. 1945. Glendora went to work summer. I think it was between the 11th second year of 10th grade and 11th grade, was it? She went to work at the New Egin Inn in Booth Bay Harbor, Maine. She met Crawford Lincoln. He was a cook's aide, a scullion. And we put on a show, an employee show. It was very well received. We burned a lot of citronella. We sat on the rocks, the rocky coast of Maine, Booth Bay Harbor. And now we're up to the summer between the 11th and the 12th grade. That summer I went to Atlantic House, no? Well, anyway, some summer resort on waiting on tables, saving up money for college. I applied to colleges. I wasn't accepted. I took special English with Edwin Smith, where by that time you had learned the grammar and you'd learned the punctuation. And then you were ready for special English, where you read a book a week and wrote a book report on it a week. And I always got mine in, and I was going with Crawford Lincoln, and he never got his in. And we used to go over and visit Edwin and Florence Smith on Mulberry Street. They used to live on Union Street where we did, just above us, and then they bought a house on Mulberry Street. And we used to go and see them. They were so patient the way they put up with us. They loved Crawford. Crawford was a Long Meadow person. That was the rich part of the area. And his father was the owner of a small manufacturing firm. His sister was Lucretia, and his brother was Addison. Crawford got accepted at Yale University, of course. And all Glendora's friends went off to Harvard and Yale and Brown and Wesleyan and Amherst and Williams. and Smith and Mount Holyoke and Strathmore and Vassar and the one up in Saratoga. What's that one? But Glennie didn't get accepted by any college. And by the way, she was practically an all-A student by this time. Oh, and she was so popular in the 11th grade that as a joke, Crawford Lincoln and a few of his buddies put Glendora up to be president of the class, the senior class of Classical High School. Very distinguished position. And because Glendora told such good jokes in the 11th grade, she became the president of the 12th grade by a plurality of 60. And William Hill, Dr. William Hill, it was his last year, and he took her aside and warned her as to the lofty position that she had just attained and to maintain the glory of Classical High School. The next year he was gone. He had retired. And Clarence Chatto took over, who was the principal of Commerce High School, and who was just the opposite of Dr. Hill. Now we're into the spring of 1946, and I believe Glendora is what? Glendora is 18 years old. She graduated, I think, magna cum laude. And she must have received 250 pictures, graduating class pictures. She was, of course, the master of the senior prom, being the president of the class. And that summer she went to work at the Equinox House as a waitress in Manchester, Vermont. She met Bobby Clark, Broadway comedian, very famous, very well liked, very good reviews, Broadway comedian, Victor Herbert's sweetheart. And Crawford came up, and we drove to Bolton Landing one night, thinking it wasn't very far. It was till 1 or 2 a.m. that we got there to see Bill Staples, who was one of the people running for president and who didn't make it because of Glendora's jokes. And by the time we got back, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. It was really a dumb thing to do. Then she got an invitation from the American International College in Springfield, Massachusetts, and was given a $300 scholarship to go there in the fall. And so she went.
Thank you.
At age 18. She took psychology, psychology, English, Spanish, science. I think that was it, wasn't it? No, there would be 5.
Oh, that's all.
And because Classical High School was such a strict high school and gave such good training, AIC was like kindergarten for her. She knew most of it, but she went at it full speed ahead. And Henry was
500
holding a hand
veterans,
grenade and it blew his hand off.
1946.
He had a hook for that.
GI Bill of Rights.
And his leg was injured by it, and he had that in a brace.
Rod Henry.
And his dreams of being a cellist were smashed. He was from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, from a wealthy family. His father owned a manufacturing
crippled
concern
his arm.
in Glendora. Talks
Injuries
to
on both
Rodney
legs. Hand
Henry
grenade.
to this day, in the year 2009. So she became known as the Brain. Now we're in the second semester, and it's the year 1947. In May, her turns 19, right?
Yes.
And what did she do that summer? I think we went back to the Atlantic House, working at the Atlantic House in Scarborough Beach, Maine, just south of Portland. Other people our age from Holyoke. Oh, we left out that the war ended in Japan with Hiroshima and the atomic bomb. What a terrible thing. Terrible, terrible thing. Franklin was one of the veterans who came home from the war. He was in D-Day, June the 6th, and it was over by June the 5th, I believe, in 1945. And he came back, and he had so many points, been in for 5 years, that he didn't have to go to the Pacific. But in 45, in August, it was over in Japan, and I was at the Atlantic House, Scarborough Beach, Portland, Maine. Think of that. War going on all that time. So, at 19, Glendora goes into her sophomore year at the American International College, and I think she took sociology, economics, English, science, what was the elective? German, with Miss Littlefield. Emil und die Detektive.
Emil und die Detektive.
And it was all A's again.
Professor Kleinfeld.
And came the second semester. All A's again. And by now, Glendora's 20. What did she do that summer? Did she go back to the Atlantic House? I know it was 2 years
Scarborough
there.
Beach, Portland, Maine.
So, in the fall of what now? She's 20, so none of her, it must be 1948. Now she's a June, no. She's a sophomore. AIC got a new library. We lived at 316 Union Street. Glendora's friends would come and play cards with her mother, Nettie, who loved to play cards. was her father doing? I believe he was still working. He was working as a barber as one job, and he started his own business doing barbering in nursing homes. I believe he was all through with the defense factories.
The war was over.
And Edna was earning a good living, renting rooms at 316 Union Street.
Thank you, Edna. You want to see the pictures?
Mrs. Whittemore and Nesworthy, and then the family of three from West Springfield who moved over here for some reason. Oh, Wayne Bellinger and his mother during, was it during high school? No, it was during high school that they lived there. And Beatrice B's husband was quartermaster in the Army, waiting to get out. That was not Wayne's father. His name was Benson. Dr. Charles Wells from Harvard. He was taking education course at Harvard. He was from Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Dr. Dorothy Spurl and Dr. Howard Spurl. Mrs. Morse, a lovely person. So we ended up and it would come the second semester, age 21. Let's stop there. We've done 2 decades. The average was 3.8, and it was almost perfect. All A's, and between the sophomore year and the junior year, what did we do that summer? Well, anyway, comes the junior year, and it's 1948, and 5 subjects weren't enough to keep me busy, so I took 6. And I got all A's and went into the year 1949, and we were living at 316 Union Street. And my mother befriended Betty Delowitz and gave Betty Delowitz a place to live, a room. And she was working off and on for the rector of Christ Cathedral, Episcopalian in Springfield, on Maple Street or Chestnut Street or whatever, near the quadrangle. Springfield had a quadrangle. It was very interesting. In one corner was the library, and then behind it was the Museum of Modern Art and the Museum of History, George Walter Vincent Smith. And there was another museum, and it was at the edge of a quadrangle of grass, where they used to have symphony concerts, the Springfield Symphony, which was very good. Now, it is graced by a statue of Dr. Seuss, who came from Springfield. his father, Theodore Geisel Sr., was head of the Parks Department in Springfield, and Franklin interviewed him often for the newspaper. So the second semester was another 6 subjects and another 6 A's. And it came into the summer of 1949. And did I work at the Atlantic House. I know it was only 2 summers that I worked at the Atlantic House. And Carol Shaw worked there, and Bill Perry, who was going to be a minister. They were classical high school people. Well, in many card games with my mother and with Carlos, and Carlos was in a gang with John Gaffney, who was the runner-up for valedictorian, and William Hughes, Marlene Unger, and they were all in the Garrett Players, a drama group, or in a radio drama group also. They had a radio station. And I had met Ethlyn Evans, whose brother Harry Evans worked for the Springfield, Massachusetts Union. And Ethlyn graduated in '49, the spring, and they had a baccalaureate service for that class at Hope Congregational Church. And Ethlyn introduced me to Franklin Buell, who was a reporter on the Springfield, Massachusetts Union, just started. Franklin Buell had been in the war, and all the generals during the war told Franklin Buell to be on the lookout for some kind of a program after the war for the GIs to go to college. Franklin Buell was very popular with the generals in the war because he could take shorthand and he could typewrite. And he did end up working for the Adjutant General's office. Stood in the English Channel June the 4th and June the 5th. Waiting for good weather, which didn't ever come, and so the 13th General cast the deciding vote, and D-Day became June the 6th. And that deciding general was Dwight Eisenhower. Franklin Buell was in the Army for 5 years. He was stationed at Fort Devens, Fort Dix, Fort Drum, I think, a long time on Governor's Island, which of course he loved, because he could go see baseball games and he could go see Broadway shows. Franklin Buell was never the fan of any baseball team exactly. He did like the Pittsburgh Pirates way back in the 30s because he thought they were going to win the World Series, but they did not. He was an eclectic baseball fan. Actually, he would take a player a young player and follow his career and follow his box scores every day in the newspaper and in the sporting news. Glendora went to Maine once during this time with her mother. I remember Ralph Arnold Folsom Jr., my brother, and Gordon Howard Folsom Jr., or Gordon Howard Folsom, my other brother. And it was up around Augusta and Gardner and Randolph. And Brother Ralph had started up a distributorship, a grocery distributorship, where he would buy products and sell them to grocery stores and then make a profit doing that. Gordon worked for him, and Ralph Edward, his son, worked for him, but Ralph Edward wanted two things in his life. One was to be a truck driver. He loved to drive trucks, big trucks, and he wanted to be a Maine state trooper, and he became both of them. Ralph Edward also put himself through college at Maine, University of Maine, and a subsidiary campus in Augusta, I guess, by going to school at night. And he turned into a rather amiable, likable person. Harry Evans, who was Lester and Lillian's son, had an automobile accident in Michigan. He ended up in Michigan because he married a woman from Michigan. And that accident made him go downhill steadily, and he died quite young. Leon died and went into a nursing home. Leon died and Cecil went into a nursing home, and it was very, very sad to see Cecil in a nursing home because she was always very neatly farmer's wife type dressed, and she had beautiful hair and she had a beautiful face and a lot of laughter, and it was so sad to see her in a nursing home in Bangor. Bertha ended up in a nursing home too, and Bertha died. Edna, my mother, was very active and able. Cecil soon died, and Lester soon died, and Leon soon died during these years. Ralph, Madison, and Wilfred were left. I believe that Stephen Folsom, who was the son of Gordon Folsom, my brother, Stephen, therefore my nephew, saw Wilfred a few times because they both worked for the state of Maine in Augusta.